When we hear the word knight, we imagine shining armor, noble blood, sworn loyalty, banners in the wind, and men who defend dynasties in the name of honor. But what if George Martin is quietly dismantling this image? What if the truest knight in his world is the one who never truly belonged to any house at all? Dunn has no lineage, no land, no political intelligence, no impressive armor, and he is not even certain he was properly knighted. And yet, when real moral choices appear, he behaves more like a knight than most of the men who wear the title. So maybe the story isn't asking who deserves power, maybe it's asking what knighthood actually means. Hi, I'm Alen, and in the previous video we explored how Dunk's choice reshaped the fate of the Seven Kingdoms. This one goes deeper into the philosophy of knighthood itself. If that question interests you, please write in the comments what do you think makes a true knight in Martin's world, and you can subscribe if you enjoy going deeper into stories like this. So the problem with knighthood in Westeros. In most of Martin's world, knighthood functions as a contract. A knight swears loyalty to a lord, defends his house, receives protection, status, and stability in return. It is service structured around hierarchy, and the system rewards those who align themselves with power. We will see how negotiable that loyalty can be. One of the fossil ways changes allegiance the moment a battle title is offered. His choice is not monstrous, it is just practical. He simply understands how the system works. In Westeros, knighthood often becomes transactional. Loyalty can be exchanged for status, advancement, proximity to power. Advancement becomes part of the equation, and knighthood looks less like a moral calling and more like a career path. So in Game of Thrones, Martin dismantles the romantic myth of knighthood. Knights are vain, cruel, politically convenient. The title Sir doesn't protect the innocent, it often protects power. For example, Sandor Clegane mocks the hypocrisy of chivalry. Jaime Lannister is Bran Kingslayer despite saving a city. The institution of knighthood appears hollow, it looks like a performance of virtue masking brutality. So across Martin's world this pattern becomes clear. When knighthood is tied to hierarchy, to advancement, to institutional loyalty, it fractures. The outer structure remains, but the moral code erodes. And yet Martin doesn't abandon the idea of knighthood entirely. Instead of this, he tests it. And we have a perfect proof of that, Brienne of Tarth. In a world where knighthood is institutionally male, she is denied the title, and yet she lives by its code more faithfully than most sworn knights. The woman who cannot legally be a knight behaves more like one than the men who are. Brienne's chivalry is still rooted in oath. She defines herself through loyalty to a liege. Her identity is structured around fealty. And that distinction matters because then we arrive at Dunk. He moves one step further. Of course, he dreams of stability too. He wants a roof, proper meals, and belonging. He's not some detached idealist who rejects comfort out of pride, but every time the story places him before a moral line, he chooses principle over advancement. Duncan Egg doesn't simply restore the fairy tale version of knighthood, it shifts the focus, and Martin doesn't redeem the system, he redeems the choice. So in Game of Thrones, the question is, can a knight remain honorable inside a corrupt world?
What about the king?
He can die just fine on his own.
In the story about Dunk and Egg, the question becomes, what if honor was never about the system to begin with? Dunk is not proof that the structure works, he is proof that virtue can exist even when the structure fails. We also used to see that in Westeros, knighthood is meant to be visible. It shines in polished armor, carries decorated shields, and rides beneath noble banners. Dunk has none of that. His armor is mismatched, his shield is plain, he has no house name, no impressive lineage. Other knights laugh at him because he looks like an imitation of something greater. And I get that contrast is exactly where Martin hides the point. The men who look most like knights often fail when the moral test arrives, and the man who looks least like one passes it. Martin strips Dunk of the spectacle of chivalry and leaves only its essence. Dunk doesn't perform knighthood, he embodies it, but not because he is flawless or confident, because when confronted with cruelty he cannot remain silent. When Aryan abuses Tendel, the silence of the other knights is deafening. They are not cowards in battle, they are simply bound to the structure that protects them. To intervene would mean defying a prince of blood, and our main hero Dunk doesn't calculate, he reacts, not because it benefits him, and definitely not because it's wise, but because he cannot tolerate injustice. This is not tournament courage, this is moral courage, and that's where Martin quietly shifts the meaning of knighthood. So after Baylor's death, Dunk is offered something he has quietly launched for: stability within power. Maker gives him a chance to enter the structure, to serve the crown, to gain position, safety, and to stop wandering. But Dunk refuses this offer. The text tells us he feels afraid, and this is very important detail here. I think it wasn't fear of hardship because he knows what hardship is. So for me, it looks like the fear of what proximity to power might demand from him. He has already seen what insulated privilege produced in men like Arian. He has seen what happens when a man grows up, never questioned, restrained, or forced to consider consequence. Arian is cruel not because he has all the comfort around, but because he's untouchable. And maybe Dunk understands instinctively that stepping into proximity with that kind of power changes a person. He said that Aegon will stay with him, wearing simple clothes and wandering, and then Maker insists that princes shouldn't sleep in ditches or eat salted meat. And Dunk replied that Maker's older sons have never slept in ditches either, and we understand this, meaning between the lines that this has not made them better men. And so we see that most knights serve a lord when Dunk serves an eternal code. And in the same piece of text, Dunk sits beneath the tree. He doesn't glorify himself, he doesn't celebrate that he survived. He wrestles with value. Was his food worth a prince's life? And this is a very philosophical moment when he said that maybe there will, some morrow will come. Then the realm will need that food even more than a prince's life. So the story places before him a symbolic tension. He said, "What shall it be, Dunk? Dragons or dragonflies?" Dragons are power, dynasty, and history, proximity to its throne, and the dragonfly is something fragile and very small. Remain near the dragon inside the structure of power, or continue on the road with something lighter, humbler, and uncertain. We already know the answer. Dunk simply continues walking, and he chooses the road. Perhaps Martin is not telling us that Dunk is always right, he's showing us that conscience is rarely certain, and that choosing without certainty may be the bravest thing of all. And this idea becomes even more powerful when we remember that Westeros itself is structured around the number seven. Seven kingdoms, seven points star, seven gods, and seven aspects of the one divine whole. The face of the seven presents a moral architecture. The father represents justice, the mother mercy, the warrior strength, the smith labor, the crown wisdom, the maiden innocence, and even the stranger morality and humility before fate. And knighthood exists within this religious framework, but knighthood itself also rests on a structure of seven virtues which are central to the medieval code of chivalry: courage, justice, mercy, generosity, faith, nobility, and hope. A true knight is not meant to merely fight well, he is expected to embody these aspects in action. And when we place those seven virtues inside a world structured around seven sacred aspects of morality, the Hedge Knight who looks least sacred ends up mirroring the moral structure of the faith more authentically than many noble houses who publicly uphold it. His courage is not loud or glorious, it's uncomfortable and costly. He stands against the prince, knowing he may die for it. His justice is immediate because he doesn't weigh consequences or political optics. Of course, he knows about consequences, but it doesn't stop him even when he sees cruelty and reacts because it violates something fundamental in him. His mercy is also quiet. He doesn't seek humiliation or revenge. He simply wants justice and harm to stop. His generosity is not about gold. He gives protection, time, loyalty, effort, food. He shares what he owns even when he has very little himself. His faith is not religious zeal, it's faith in what a knight's supposed to be. Even when he doubts himself, he refuses to abandon that inner standard. His nobility doesn't come from blood, it comes from conduct. In a world obsessed with lineage, he proves that nobility can be chosen, and perhaps most importantly, he carries hope. Not a naive optimism, but the stubborn belief that things can be better if someone simply acts. This is radical in a world like Westeros, and here is where it becomes almost poetic. The Hedge Knight who lacks title, wealth, polish, and prestige ends up embodying the very virtues that define the ideal of knighthood. But here's a crucial distinction. He does all of this not perfectly, but very consistently. Martin doesn't present Dunk as a flawless embodiment of those virtues. He presents him as someone who struggles towards them. Dunk doubts himself. He questions whether he deserves the title. He wonders whether his food was worth of Prince's life. He fears that he might have been foolish, and here Martin is not idealizing a knight, he is redefining one. Knighthood in this story is not the absence of fear. It is action despite fear. It is choice. It's not moral perfection, it is alignment with one's values. And Dunk doesn't look like a perfect knight, he looks like a man trying to be one. And that makes him far more radical than an untouchable hero ever could be. So perhaps the real question is not whether Dunk changes the realm, perhaps the real question is whether he changes what knighthood means. Because in this story, knighthood is not inherited. It is not validated by titles and not guaranteed by vows. It is chosen, and chosen in discomfort and in fear. Chosen when you look ridiculous in front of men who measure worth by status, and that may be Martin's most subversive idea. The true knight is not the one who serves a banner most faithfully. It is the one who serves conscience most stubbornly. So if you want to explore how Dunk's choices ripple outward into the fates of the Seven Kingdoms, you can watch my previous video, but here Martin leaves us with very philosophical questions. What makes a knight? A title, a sigil, or a decision you make? Write your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to see how you interpret this. And thank you for watching this video. If you enjoy unpacking stories beneath the surface, you can subscribe to my channel. There are many more layers waiting to be explored.